Hello, everybody. Welcome to Joe the Lawyer. Wanted to jump on here, do a quick live stream where I cover the not guilty verdict in the Kyle Rittenhouse case. That's right. You heard it. Not guilty of all charges. Especially significant, the gun charge, the possession of gun charge was dismissed. And the reason it was dismissed was because prior to the verdict coming in, the reason it was dismissed was because under Wisconsin law, that law that doesn't allow a minor to possess a weapon at 17 years old only applies to short-barreled weapons. I don't want to get into the real technical aspects of that. But he had an AR-15, which was not a short barrel weapon. It was a long barrel rifle. Therefore, that charge did not apply. That charge was dismissed by Judge Schroeder prior to the deliberations and prior to the verdict. The verdict was delivered today. I don't know how many people saw it. Many of my viewers, it was a very emotional moment. While the delivery of verdicts generally is, and Kyle broke down a few times. As defendants tend to do, because you're sitting through that trial, you have all this energy. You're just going to have all this energy built up, all this frustration. It's hard to imagine a moment that has more stress packed into a single moment than the reading of a jury verdict. Is there anything, I'm sure there is, that has that much sort of drama and suspense just built into it? I mean, 12 people making a decision, you don't know which way it's going to go. I mean, I don't know if it gets any less drama packed than that. Hey, Deacon, how you doing? Eva, how you doing? Hello, everybody. Thanks for dropping in. Thank you for dropping in. I wanted to give some final thoughts here on the Kyle Rittenhouse not guilty verdict. I actually made a video this morning, okay? Made a video this morning about the deliberations. I'm still going to drop it. It's not relevant anymore. I made it this morning. I did think, oh, well, if they come back with the verdict, nobody's going to be interested in this. I'm going to post it anyway with a nice warning. But I was going to talk some more about the deliberations and make some more predictions, prognostications. I did that. The video didn't go up yet. I am going to do that. I wanted to drop in, though, and talk about the Kyle verdict. I'm going to do a little sip here. We're going to wait till about 10 minutes in to do the same time sip. Okay, everybody? Got my We the People mug. Yes, came back not guilty. Now, a lot of people were predicting, it's a little too early to say, but I don't think we're going to see mass riots or mass protests or mass destruction of property over this. I'm not sure. I think this Rittenhouse trial, one of the reasons it's gotten so much focus is because there isn't as much news, right? Like, especially over the last year and a half. I mean, coronavirus, George Floyd, the protests happening, the election. I mean, 2020 was a wild year. So there was so much news that certain things that might have normally been covered by the news was getting blocked out. And I think this Rittenhouse trial ended up maybe getting more attention than it would have normally, because we've been in a more calm news cycle over the couple of weeks, right? The United States pulled out of Afghanistan. There's no elections pending. Of course, there's COVID news. We always are going to get COVID news, I think, now until maybe we die. But there wasn't many. So this was a huge focus of the media, when I don't think under normal circumstances that it would have been. I don't think many people were as invested. I mean, I find the case fascinating. I'm an attorney. The law of self-defense is very fascinating. But I think it was just something for the media to focus on, for there to be some controversy, to get clickbaits, to get ratings. I don't think people were as emotionally invested in this trial as many people thought that they were. I also don't think that this trial, it happened during the Kenosha protest, but it's really not about any of the underlying civil rights issues that sparked the protests of 2020. It's more just about self-defense and when you should look for trouble and when you shouldn't look for trouble. So I think maybe it got overblown a little bit. Again, I'm very fascinated by it because I find the law of self-defense to be fascinating in and of itself. And this actually was an interesting case given all the fact patterns. Right. And then there was the introduction of race, Archangel, the introduction. I don't think that this trial was, I mean, everybody involved was white. So I don't even think it was as racially charged. Like people thought it was going to be like this huge racially divisive trial. And I just don't think that it was, no matter which way the verdict came down. Whereas the Derek Chauvin trial was, and that was, I think that was a justified narrative. I don't know, it might have been overplayed for that trial, but it was certainly a justified narrative in that trial where it just didn't exist in this trial. So, you know, I called, I made predictions. I predicted, I'm going to pat myself on the back. Come on, Joe, pat yourself on the back. I predicted a not guilty verdict. I stuck by that. I predicted guilty for the Chauvin trial too. So I'm going to give myself a 2 for 2 in that area. I'm going to take a 2 for 2 on those two trials. You know, honestly, I think that the decisions on both of them were correct. And that's one of the great things, in my opinion, about the United States justice system. Of course, people have their complaints and it's not perfect and there's inequities that exist within it. I'm not going to deny that it exists to some degree, but I do think there's something about 12 jurors of your peers sitting in judgment on another citizen, when those jurors were selected through a process by both parties involved in order to be fair and provide an unbiased opinion. And they sit down, and I have found, and no matter what people say, I have found that juries really, really take their job pretty seriously. As bad as civic life, I sometimes think, is in this country, you know, the lack of history and knowledge of government and culture that a lot of people in the United States have, a lot of young people have, is disheartening. I do believe that when they sit on that jury, they take it really, really seriously. And a lot of people complain about it, but a lot of people, and I understand why people complain about sitting on a jury. You're missing work. You have to take care of a family member, a loved one. There's all kinds of reasons where jury duty is a burden. I totally get that. But the people who sit on it generally take it really, really seriously. And I applaud this jury, really any jury that takes their time in deliberations and then makes a decision. This jury sat for 4.5 days. I get the feeling they looked over all the evidence, maybe looked it over twice, thought hard, had a lot of discussions, and came to a decision. The thing that bothered me most was the introduction of race. I agree. Don't think the prosecution came with their A game. Well, I think the prosecution was a little bit sloppy at times, but I wouldn't say, I think they threw everything in the kitchen sink at Kyle. I thought that they went really hard at him. I really did. And I thought they went so hard that they even crossed the line at times, which is usually what defense attorneys do. It's usually defense attorneys who are pulling out every trick in the book to try to prevent their client from being convicted. In this situation, it's usually the person with the worst case, okay? And here, I do think from the beginning, the prosecution's case was not as good. The reason race was brought into it was the initial protest was about, which did get lost in this trial. Yes, I agree, Eva. I do. You're right. The initial protest was about race and racial issues, and that's what led to the riots. That's true. But the real fact, the facts of this case and how it played out really had nothing to do with race one way or another. It really did not. It had nothing to do with it. So, Howdy you, 235. Thank you for joining the live stream. Just giving some final thoughts here on the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. I think that the jury got it right. I do. I was on the not guilty train from the beginning. I did pay pretty close attention to this trial. I've seen most of the video, not all the video, but I've seen video of all the incidents. I watched all of Rittenhouse's testimony. I watched parts of the testimony of most of the key witnesses. And so I was pretty informed on this trial. And I really do think that the jury got it right. The one thing I was thinking, okay, I'm a criminal defense attorney, as you all know. And sometimes there are certain crimes that are catch-all crimes, that we call them catch-alls, because almost anybody on any given day could be accused and possibly convicted of this. And one of those is disorderly conduct. And I kept thinking, if they wanted to get Kyle, they should have charged him with disorderly conduct. That would have stuck. That would have stuck. If they wanted to get a conviction, they should have charged him with disorderly conduct. Because if you read disorderly conduct, oh my gosh, let me tell you, it's the most general freaking law in the world. Like you could be convicted of disorderly conduct for spitting a piece of gum on the sidewalk, for talking too loud. Okay, you can get convicted of disorderly conduct for almost anything. So if they wanted to get him, I thought they should have hit him with that. Coming from the law enforcement side, I'm still wondering why he was there in the first place. You know what, Eva? That's something else I was talking about that I want to comment on. Hang on a second here. I want to comment on why we have police in the first place in vigilantism generally. And I think one of the reasons a lot of people were upset with this case is because they didn't want Rittenhouse, they didn't want to give a green light or a rubber stamp on vigilantism, right? What is vigilantism? That's when individuals outside of the role of government or some organized force take justice into their own hands. And vigilantism is generally seen, unless you're Batman, but let's face it, even the Batman is hated by many. So is Spider-Man. I have thousands, just an FYI, you guys may or may not know this. I was a huge comic book geek. I still am. I have thousands of Spider-Man comics. And Spider-Man was always called a vigilante by J. Jonah Jameson, the newspaper editor at I believe it was the Globe. And so that's what a lot of people were upset about is vigilantism, okay? And that's why the police exist, so that regular citizens don't have to take justice into their own hands, right? Because what can happen when that happens? What can happen when individuals take justice into their own hands? Well, you get blood feuds. You get the Hatfields and McCoys. You get gangland shootings that happen all the time today. The reason that a lot of drug dealers get into gunfights, the reason it happens is because they can't go to law enforcement to enforce a drug deal gone bad. They can't go to law enforcement in order to back them up at a drug deal where things might get hairy. The police aren't going to help them. So they have to take justice into their own hands. And that's a legitimate concern that people had regarding this case. Is they didn't want to see a vigilante rewarded. Now, was Kyle a vigilante? Well, he's down there putting out fires, et cetera, et cetera. A lot of people, Tulsi Gabbard said, well, Kyle wouldn't have had to step in if the government was doing their job. There's truth in that. There is some truth in that, but you have to look closely at the circumstance. I'm not for vigilante justice. Okay. I don't think but I don't think that's what Kyle was engaged in. See, Kyle was there. He was putting out fires. He was doing other things. And these people came at him. And that's one of the reasons he was acquitted. I don't believe in vigilante justice. The Arbery case is a bit different. That smells a lot more of vigilante justice, right? Wouldn't you all agree? In that case is a hairier case where the individual still may be acquitted. But that's one of the problems that a lot of people have is vigilante justice. And, in this circumstance, the government over pretty much over all last summer decided to take a laid back stance and allow a lot of this energy to be released and a lot of this rioting to happen. I don't know if they should have or shouldn't have. But that's what caused people like Kyle to step in and fill the void. Okay, everybody. We got 11 people in here. I'm only going to go for about 15 more minutes, but everybody who's here, I have today, this is my We the People glass. Okay. And, it's got on there. Look at that. The Second Amendment. All right. Raise your cup, your glass in the air. Cheers with me. It tastes better when we sip together. Cheers. I know the label's still on the bottom. I tried to pull it off. Yeah, law enforcement appeared to be, I believe it was the law enforcement strategy it was like a containment strategy instead of a intervention type strategy, right? So salute. So let's take, for example, I love ancient history, but when the Romans were fighting Carthage in the Punic Wars, Hannibal kicked their butts 3 times in open combat. So what happened? The Romans decided to employ the Fabian strategy, where they said, we're going to contain Hannibal. We're not going to fight him out in the open. And that strategy ended up draining the resources and patience of the Punic general Hannibal. And eventually Rome was able to regain their might, invade Carthage itself, and Hannibal was recalled to defend the capital city. So what happened here? The police in most of the riots took a containment strategy because they didn't want to intervene directly because it could have made things worse. So they decided to contain the rioting, contain the protest, and to arrest people afterwards at later times instead of stopping it in its action. And you can say, well, that's a shame, but it probably, in my opinion, was the best strategy in this situation. It was probably the best strategy because if the police went in really hard, it could actually make things even worse. So, people like Kyle stepped into the void, and vigilantism is generally not a good thing. I don't think Kyle was a vigilante, though. He was there trying to do other things, and then he was attacked by these other people who were more vigilantes than Kyle was. And Kyle was forced to defend himself, and I think he did the right thing. I don't think this case is about vigilantism as much as people think it is, or about what or the vigilantism really came from the other side, because these people thought that they were doing justice by going after Kyle. And that was pretty ridiculous in my opinion. So it was a long trial. It was a little bit exhausting for the country, not as much as I thought it was, but I did think that they got the right answer here with the not guilty verdict. And so, the police exist, though. Back to my greater point, the police exist to enforce justice so that regular people don't have to, so that hopefully a neutral force can come in and stop people from breaking the law, stop people from taking justice into their own hands. That's also why the courts exist, in order to allow these disputes to play out in a civil and fair manner. Now, not everyone's always going to be happy with how the courts play out, but it reduces vigilante violence, which is what we would have if we didn't have the courts, whether they be civil courts or criminal courts. They are extremely important to the smooth functioning of a society. You must have courts, and you must have courts that are perceived as fair. And I do think that this verdict is perceived, it was fair, and well, not by everybody, but I think by most people, just like I think the Chauvin verdict was perceived as fair. And what you also have I think 12 jurors sitting on a jury lends legitimacy and fairness to the decision, so that it's not coming from some judge who sits up there, high, like some oligarch or something. You know what I mean? Like, it comes from the people themselves. All right, everybody, raise your cup, your glass. Sip with me. It tastes better when we sip together. Cheers. Do another one. None of them should have been there in the first place. If you let the justice system do its job, you don't need rioting, which was just an excuse to loot anyway. Well, that's true. There's truth in that too, Gary. There is some truth in that. But you're going to have points in society and in history where there's a lot of energy, that's built up. And I really think that a lot of the commentators, when talking about what happened in 2020, got it right. You had, number one, you have COVID-19. And number two, so COVID-19 puts the country under stress. People are dying. They don't know how to deal with this. It's strange. It's new. Then everybody's locked down for COVID-19, this global pandemic, something we haven't seen in 100 years. Everybody's locked down, even creating more frustration and energy. On top of that, politics had been highly polarized between left and right for the last 4 years, and an election was looming in the fall of 2020. Then you get the spark that lit the fire in the death of George Floyd, and boom, it exploded. So, you're right, Gary, but it doesn't take into account, I think, the amount of emotion, frustration, and energy that was flowing through the country in 2020. And things are very different right now. That's why also the reaction to the Rittenhouse trial, I think, is going to be very different. Hey, DGen, how you doing? Thank you very much for stopping in. Long time no see. Hope you're doing well, sir. I appreciate you jumping in. So, it's hard. Like, I don't think there was the rioting was justified last year. I don't believe it was justified, but you can see how the energy was built up in the populace and then it exploded. That's not hard to see. And it did peter out over time. The biggest thing that I didn't like was a lot of the politicians who were cheering it on. I think that may have encouraged it. And I think that, many politicians, people in power, had a measured voice, but many did not. And that was one of my major complaints with everything that went down in 2020. The wheels of justice may turn, but they turn in the right direction. Sometimes over time, the great Martin Luther King, he said, the arc of justice is long, but it bends towards justice over time. And don't quote me on that word for word. Hey, Jeffrey, yeah, I got the shirt. I've had this shirt for 20 freaking years now, man. You know how old this shirt is? I can't believe. Yeah, it's one of my favorite shirts, though. The arc of justice is long, but bends the arc of time. I don't know what the quote is, but you guys got it. All right, a little more coffee here. So, and so the state has to have a monopoly on force in order to prevent individuals from taking justice into their own hands. Because when individuals take justice into their own hands, that's when you get a feud, a killing feud, a death feud, like the Hatfields and McCoys. That's when you get street violence. That's when you get mafia gangs fighting against each other and killing each other, which happened far too long in this country. That is vigilante justice. And that was a legitimate concern. But if you look closely at the facts here, Kyle was down there with an AR-15, but he was there trying to mostly do good acts. And these people, they came after him far too aggressively. And I believe, given the facts, that his actions were justified. It's not like he was driving down the street and trying to shoot people on the side, randomly shoot people on the side of the street. It's like, that's not what happened. That's not what happened. Or even if you look at what happened in Charlottetown with that guy who drove that car into a crowd, I mean, that's murder. That's homicide. When you take your vehicle and drive it at someone in a way that is surely going to kill them. We shall overcome, because the arc of moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. I got about 7 of those words. Don't you think, Gary? I got about 7 of those words. So, the Rittenhouse trial, a good point was made here in the feed. The Arbery trial invokes race. The Rittenhouse trial does not, but the Arbery trial also just does not appear to have invoked as much attention. But there may still be a big reaction depending on that. I really don't know what's going to happen on the Arbery trial. Now, in the last case I gave you, the thing that the defense has to use is they can use the right of citizen's arrest. And if the jury believes that these guys were acting under a legitimate right of citizen's arrest, they may be acquitted. If the jury doesn't believe that, then their confrontation with Arbery may have led to them forfeiting the right to self-defense under the law. Like, watch my last video. Watch my last video for a more detailed discussion on that. So does anybody want to bounce any questions off me or want any comments from Joe the lawyer? Just wanted to drop in, give my thoughts on the Kyle trial. Love you too, Jeffrey. Love you too, brother. Just wanted to drop in, give my final thoughts on this trial. I got some other good videos coming up, but this is definitely dominated. It was really just an interesting trial because, it involved multiple individuals being shot in multiple sequences. We had some video. We had multiple witnesses from different perspectives, invoked the law of self-defense from a trial lawyer standpoint, like from a nerd standpoint. Boom, boom. From a legal nerd standpoint, this was a fascinating trial. Honestly, more interesting than the Chauvin trial. In my opinion, the Chauvin trial was really about the medical evidence. The medical evidence was extremely powerful in that trial. When was I in the Air Force, Eva? I was Air Force 2002 to 2006 with one of my good friends who's on the feed here. I was an F-15 crew chief. I worked on fighter jets. I worked a little bit on A-10s too, F-15s, F-16s. I was stationed in Okinawa, Japan for 2 years. Did about a little more than a year at Eglin Air Force Base during training. I was in Panama City at Tyndall Air Force Base, Wichita Falls, Texas, Lackland Air Force Base, Texas. Hey, I take that as a compliment coming from a jarhead. You know what I'm saying? I'll take it. So, yeah, those were my years. That was my time. Kadena Air Force Base and Eglin Air Force Base. And then my training 02 to 06, some of the best years of my life. I miss them in a lot of ways. Love my Air Force, blue, hoorah, hoorah. But anybody else got any questions? Just wanted to drop in, like I said, talk about Kyle a little bit. The verdict, not guilty. That's what I predicted. I believe it was the correct verdict. I think the prosecution was a bit overzealous. They could have done a better job. I thought they were overzealous. I do think it'd be hard to say they didn't try. They really did try to get a conviction here. I commend all the attorneys involved, frankly, to go through a tough, long trial like this and put your best foot forward. And really, that's how justice is supposed to work out. Okay, that's the point that we have in the United States. Just a few more minutes. Let me hear the sound of my voice a little bit longer. Okay. because you guys know I like it. I mean, I'm humble, but I have an ego, right? But we have an adversarial system, right? We have an adversarial system, and the adversarial system says you get two sides, whether it's a plaintiff and a defendant in a civil case or the prosecutor and the defendant in a criminal case, and they go at each other as hard as they can. Boom, they crash. And through that, the jury or the fact finder will get the most complete picture and get to make a decision, which hopefully gets as close to the truth as possible. You're never going to get 100% truth. That's the adversarial system. Now, many other countries' systems are not as adversarial as that, right? The judges sit as neutral arbitrators, but in some countries, the judge is also the prosecutor. Some countries are much less adversarial and don't provide, in my opinion, as many rights for a defendant who is accused of a crime. And then some countries do not have the right to a jury trial in as many circumstances as the United States. So I'm a big believer in the jury trial, a trial by your peers. A lot of other countries, you're just going to have the judge who was elected or appointed making all the decisions. And in jury trials, well, most ex-British Commonwealth, but I do believe some European countries have a very, very limited right to a jury trial. It's judges who make all the decisions. So our adversarial system, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of the United States justice system. And of course, there are going to be bad decisions. Of course, that's going to happen. But when a decision comes from a jury, it's generally accepted. It really is. And I think that that's probably a good thing. You want to see a fascinating, you want to delve into some of the fascinating aspects of that. Watch Cocaine Cowboys. I should do a whole episode on Cocaine Cowboys. Watch Cocaine Cowboys on Netflix. What a show about criminal justice system. What a documentary. What a documentary. Just tremendous. It answers so many questions and raises so many questions. What do I think of Kyle's reaction? I commented on that at Philo Girl. I commented on that at the beginning. I thought it was very natural. You can imagine, especially when you are on trial for murder, and then the moment comes where you either walk away a free person or you go to jail for the rest of your life. Imagine being under the stress of that decision. Like, there's no way Kyle slept the night before. He probably didn't sleep for 2 nights before. The lawyers didn't sleep for nights before. Imagine the stress of that. Okay. And that's one of the things like being a criminal defense attorney, like when you're a prosecutor, and I'm not saying prosecutors, they have incredibly difficult and stressful jobs. But as a prosecutor, you are going to, if you lose, generally, if you lose, nobody's life is ruined. As a defendant, as a defense attorney, if you lose, that could be sort of the end of the life for your client. I mean, it's the end of the road for your client. It's the end. It's the end. Go to jail for life, for life. So Kyle's reaction was perfectly natural, and overall, he handled it really well. Eglin was a great place, James. Eglin was an amazing base. Kadena was an amazing base too. Good old Camp Hansen. All the Marine Corps stations. We used to go to MCAS Futenma. They had like a great 4th of July party. I'd hit up the BX there. They had a bunch of shopping tents at Futenma. I've been, I think, on Camp Hansen too. There used to be a Subway when I was there. There was a Subway on Hansen that we would go to just to go to Subway, because you're living in Japan. It's like at Kadena, we had a Chili's. I'm not saying we weren't lucky. We had a Popeyes. We had a Chili's. I think we had like a Vincent's Pizza. We had an A&W, a couple other joints. The Popeyes was the best. And then we had Zephiel. I hear you, man. Kadena was just a great place. And going to those other Marine Corps bases were fun, was a lot of fun too. Yeah, we had, when I was, they had like this, they had like, there was like even like a family, sort of family owned Italian restaurant on Cadena. Now it closed while I was there. I did go there. Unfortunately it closed, but the Chili's was the spot, man. The Chili's on Cadena, when I was there, woo, that was the spot. And let's talk about, I did a video on our Arbery case already. I did a video on that, my last video. With Kyle's case, self-defense, whether you can defend yourself against the black person. Well, I think the Arbery case is quite more complicated than that. In the Arbery case, I think invokes the idea of vigilante justice more than the Kyle case does. So really, really interesting. Both fascinating cases from a legal perspective. You know, the Arbery case is going to come down to the right of citizen arrest. This is the right of citizen arrest. And I think it may actually end up getting those guys acquitted. I think that they will likely be found not guilty. But I'm not nearly as confident in that as I was. And I don't know as much about that case. And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong, but I'm saying on the law, I think there's a good chance that Arbery, that case, I feel that case really makes my stomach turn a lot more. The Arbery case, the Rittenhouse case, let's face it, all these cases are tragic because people lost their lives. They're extremely tragic. The Rittenhouse case it's still a tough call. It was much more clear cut than the Arbery case, in my opinion. So really, really wild. All right. Okay, everybody needs to get his A15 back and put some marks in it. Gary W. Okay, everybody, I'm going to go. I just want to hop in real quick. Thank you. I'm glad I got a nice crowd. We got 16 viewers. Thank you for tuning in to Joe the Lawyer to talk about this. If you like my content, please like, subscribe. Go ahead and give me a like before you drop out. Again, I appreciate the high viewer rate on this Friday night. Hope you guys are enjoying my show. Much more to come, everybody. Much more to come. And street plug, yes, Tulsa is a horrible tragedy where individuals should have been prosecuted for days and weeks. It was an evil, despicable acts that occurred back then. I do think the country has changed and has come a long way since that time, though, about 100 years ago. I do think there's been a lot of progress. We obviously have a lot more work to do. James, yeah, Shepherd Air Force Base. You met your wife at AJ's at Destin. Get out of here, man. I have been to AJ's many times, and the swamp and all the joints down there in Destin. I love Destin, Florida. I love it. So beautiful. Love Destin. Okay, everybody, have a great day. I'm going to jump off. James, have a good one, sir. See you guys later. Bye-bye.